You ever done drugs? Let's take a step back. Post-Void is a psychedelic, Lovecraftian, fast-paced movement shooter roguelite with a retro-pixelated but heavily styled graphic design heavy on gore and violence. Post-Void released to a relatively quiet but positive reception in mid-2020, with it sadly being swept under the rug in the still ongoing movement shooter gold rush of the past few years. With titles like Ultrakill, Dusk, Doom, and Medieval, it got lost in the proverbial gold mine buried under dozens of others. Post-Void took a successful roguelite formula, but spiced it up by adding a very loud color palette leaning heavily into the psychedelic. Post-Void has 12 stages that you have to complete to finish a run. Each of these stages take place in a high-contrast psychedelic purgatory littered with random household furniture. The walls are plastered in a vibrant 80s wallpaper, with the floors covered in an equally obnoxious carpet. Little furnishings like Art Deco couches and houseplants give off an almost retro-futurism look, while lamps look more vintage, and then some enemies have suits pulled straight from 80s Vice. For anyone seeing it for the first time, it reads purely as visual clutter, but each of the enemies' disfigured designs stand out among the oversaturated hallways. As you move deeper into the levels, you'll be met with more changes in level design and even more enemies to deal with. None of the levels are fixed, as each layout is generated from a pre-existing pool of set hallways and rooms. Each sequential run is just as disorienting as the last, and add on the punk-esque surf rock looping music, and all of it together is just a full assault on the senses. Now, it doesn't look bad in the way Cruelty Squad looks bad. There's just a lot of things trying to pull your attention all at once. Oddly enough, it reminds me of MTV in the weird Lovecraftian disfigurement way. This stretches from the esoteric body horror of the enemies to your emaciated corpse of a character. Enemies are weirdly put together, like the suits being a floating tar-skinned mouth connected to a spine propping up a beat-up suit from Miami Vice. And then there's the Flamingo being, The story on offer is plainly told out to you, with the goals of your character set in stone from the beginning tutorial. You ripped your head off because of a headache, and now you're going to pour the liquid from your head idol on a new seed in serenity to sprout a new flower of hope and life. There's definitely hints of a deeper meaning, like gaining sentience, turning your pain into hope, and overcoming the nightmare challenges of inner thoughts that could be described as an empty void. You're free to make your own interpretation of the story, as the meaning is left purposefully vague and can give off a kind of snootier, holier-than-thou video essay vibe. That being said, the story, at least to me, felt more like a means to an end. Sure, there's probably a deeper 30-minute analysis to be made here, but with the story left so purposefully vague, it reads plainly as a suitably weird parallel to the visuals. Now back to the gameplay. It's a classic roguelite. Your goal is to progress through each of the levels as new and more enemies are added to combat your growing strength with each new upgrade. The game is constantly on a timer, as time equals health. The more time you spend dicking around getting lost in the hallways, the more health you burn. Killing enemies keeps your health topped up, but you don't want to spend too much time tapping every enemy in front of you. There are 7 enemies, each with a unique way to fuck you over, some of which ending runs much more than others. Suits are your run-of-the-mill ranged enemy, and most levels are littered with them. Dodge through their projectiles and tap them to the head. The Flamingo is your next most common enemy, and each level has these things sprinting to kill you. Now, the design of the Flamingo is borderline indescribable. Its head is practically just a giant mouth, with its stubby torso being propped up by 2 toothpicks of legs and covered in an olive green skin tone. The other enemies, like crying mouths and telehands, can be annoying further on in the levels, especially in narrow spaces, but even with the telehand slowdown, they're so quick to kill, there's not much to worry about. Bulb hands are in the same vein, dealing no damage but just flashbanging your screen. And just like telehands, they're quick to kill. Flesh walls are the last enemy, but they're more of an obstacle. You'll find these guys from Act 2 onward blocking random hallways. Sometimes they're blocking the necessary path, and sometimes they're blocking dead ends. A special thing to note with all enemies is how quickly they can be killed. I touched on it briefly with the suits, but most enemies in this game can be dispatched with one shot from almost any weapon. Quick precision is the name of the game, as suits, flamingos, and even flesh walls can be killed in a quick headshot, leaving an explosion of gore in their place. This makes the starting pistol a pretty reliable take through at least the first act, but arguably to the end of the game. Alternative weapons like the shotgun approach a that direction mentality, and the same thing can be said about the Uzi, especially with the bouncing bullets upgrade. The knife is a special case as it's a pretty decent weapon, allowing you to move faster and kill almost anything in one hit, but it requires some preparation and confidence to use properly. This ebb and flow of fast-paced movement and quick killing is nothing new to the movement shooter department, with Post Void just refining the style into a concise roguelite format. This short burst playstyle is pretty fun overall, but lacks a lot of replayability unless you're shooting for a score on the leaderboard. That's really it though. It's a pretty short game, with any given run taking less than 6 minutes. It's a little bit weird, but pretty worth the $2 given you're not epileptic. I've got no clue what I'm reviewing next, but I'll see you then.